Well, hello everyone. Welcome back. This is your host, Tooclevermafia, and you are listening to the Tooclevermafia podcast. And we are bringing you today another great episode, right, AJ? Right over. Thank you again for another lovely intro, and over in the sound booth. And we're back again, and this election is still going on. We're doing our second episode this week, which is we don't usually do that, right, AJ? Yeah, we don't get two out in a week. This is like overtime. I mean, well, you're not getting paid overtime, but this is overtime. But anyway, uh, we're gonna update you if you haven't watched the news and you're living under a rock somewhere. But we're gonna give you nothing's really changed since our Wednesday episode. The same old stuff again today. Where we stand. Nevada's up in the air. Arizona, they're looking to do a recount. Georgia, North Carolina are leaning toward President Trump, where, like I said, Nevada and Arizona are leaning towards Joe Biden, and Pennsylvania leaning toward President Trump. But it's a close one. It's a real nail biter. And but today we're not going to talk about the election because it hasn't been decided yet, and it is what it is, right? We've all done our part and voted, hopefully, and there's not much we can do to change how the outcome is, and people will contest it no matter who wins, and they'll go through it, and we'll ultimately have a decision one way or another, and we'll have a new president, or we'll have a president in January, either a new one or the same one. We don't know, but we'll see. But what we're going to talk about today is the election process, and AJ and I were talking about it, and the election process is just broken, folks. We need a better system, and it's just one of those things that you can't ignore. The way that the process is, the just everything from the Electoral College to the split between Republican and Democrat, and independents don't have a chance. You have all of these different things that are just need to be changed, need to be updated. I'll say they need to be updated, right? Because some of this stuff is very antiquated. It's, we've used it forever, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing to do with current technology. Back in the day, I would imagine somebody was on a horse riding around picking up people's votes. I mean, I guess I could do some research and figure out how they voted back in the day, but it wasn't really the way it is today. That's for sure. And the mail-in ballots and all the different states being different, having their own way of doing things, causes a problem, on its own. So we got some ideas. We're going to throw them out there. Feel free to hit us up on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, at Tooclevermafia, TOO Clever Mafia. We're gonna. This is a live premiere, so feel free to comment if you're watching this on YouTube as well. Don't forget to like our podcast if you're listening to us and you like what we do here. That helps us out tremendously. We really do appreciate it. And we're going to get into this. We're going to get into the nitty gritty, right, AJ? We're going to really get down into, we're going to go over what the Republicans believe, what the Democrats believe. Maybe there's a possibility we can meet in the middle somewhere and really try to figure this thing out. I mean, I don't know if what we say will make any difference at the end of the day. But we'll see. We'll really work it out, and we'll really see what, break it down, so people understand it. Because quite honestly, I don't think many people understand the entire election process and the Electoral College and how that works. And if you look at the Republican and Democratic Party of today, they've changed so much compared to the Republican and Democratic Party of just 30 years ago. So why? Why is that? So are the parties even significant anymore, I guess is the best way to put it. But so we are going to dive right into this, AJ. We're going to dive deep. We're going to figure out what's going on here, right? Yeah. So, yeah, like we always do here at the Too Clever Mafia podcast. But check us out. Visit our website, www.tooclevermafia.com. We're available everywhere, folks. So wherever you're listening to us, we, again, do appreciate you subscribing and following our podcast wherever, if you're on Breaker, if you're on, was it Cast Light, or I don't know. There's a ton of them out there. Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever we are. And we do appreciate it. But we'll be right back after we take a short break, and we're going to get right into this. Well, hello, welcome back. Welcome back. Thank you again, AJ. Hello, Mafians. Hello, new listeners. This is your host, Too Clever Mafia, and you're listening to the Too Clever Mafia podcast. And we are back, and we are going into details today, AJ, and our election process is broken. We need a better system. Do you agree? Yeah, you do agree. Yeah, it's so confusing. And then you have the Electoral College and let's go. First off, casting your ballot, right? Different rules everywhere, every state. And I understand that's part of kind of how things were and how it's supposed to be. But every state is different and there's different rules anywhere. So right now, people are migrating from California to Nevada, Arizona. A lot of people moving to Florida. A lot of people are moving to Texas from different parts of the country. So just that alone causes so much confusion, and you go to a new state and you don't know the rules, and they're not necessarily everywhere, and it's almost as if you go into a different state and you go over a bridge. You ever go over a bridge into a different state over over a body of water of some sort? And usually when you get into that new state, it'll tell you, there'd be all kinds of road signs that tell you, hey, this is the new you can turn on red here, or you can turn on red, or whatever it is. And there's all these different laws and rules. And the reason why they do that is because those are not commonplace laws and rules. There might be more of an exception to the norm. And by law, I mean, they do say ignorance of the law is no excuse, but they realize that, hey, people aren't aware of it, not because they're just ignorant of the law, which I guess you are, but you're not really. It's not the norm for everyone, and that's the problem with the ballots. Some states have different times that they can submit them. You have absentee ballots, you have early voting, you have all that stuff. You have mail-in ballots, and certain states can only count them at a certain time, and there's all these rules. And I understand this year was a very unique year, right, AJ? I mean, we've had our challenges. Everybody's had their challenges out there, and I hope everybody's still doing well and continuing to fight on and get through them all. But it's one of those things where you cannot sit back and just ignore the fact that this whole system is broken. This whole election system is broken. I mean, you have the polls across the country, in my opinion, should all be closing at the same time. Now, hear me out, because I know there's different time zones, but you should have, the West Coast. Our show is recorded on the East Coast, but on the West Coast, I've been there quite a few times. They have a kind of a mentality that, the world starts when New York City turns its lights on the East Coast. So, if you work on the West Coast, you're kind of almost required to get going the same time as the East Coast. So why not just, if an election, let's say we keep the ballots open till 9:00 on, across the country, but as the time zones shift, we knock off an hour. So that way, by the time, I guess the far West would be, Hawaii. Maybe we can make an exception for Hawaii and Alaska, but the far West would be let's say California, which is generally a 3-hour difference in time zones between New York City and let's say Los Angeles. Why can't we have a 9:00 end time on the East Coast, a 6 p.m. end time on the West Coast, or extend the East Coast, whatever, to make it the same? So we know the whole country is done voting at the same time, and then the counting begins. Maybe we can open up earlier on the West Coast, which is kind of the norm, I think, if you live on the West Coast. I mean, drop me a line if that's not the case, but from what I understand, the West Coast, and my experience, the West Coast is definitely ahead, and they get started earlier because they're working on New York time, even though, so in a lot of instances. But either way, that's got to change, right, AJ? I mean, that's just crazy. That's crazy, everyone. We cannot have this different time zone, and I understand if there's issues and you open up later or for whatever, and you have to make an exception, but there's got to be a standardization to this. This is just, this is caused, that is alone is causing huge problems with this election and in the past as well. So somebody's got to say, hey, listen, we need to standardize this voting process. And, you know, there's all kinds of crazy things going on out there, and I don't know if everyone's aware of it, but there's vote interpretation. You know, what is a good vote? What is a not good vote? How they check the votes, you know, making sure people don't duplicate their votes, mail in and do it in person. I'm not just talking this year, but in general. You know, some require voter ID cards. Some states don't. Some match up signatures. There's, you know, federal law states, in case anybody wasn't aware, but federal law does state that we select our president on election day. Now, it also, the state law, the state legislation, they set the rules for the elections. Now, back in the day, well, I say back in my day, but it was way before my day. But back in the day, state legislation, it was different. The voting was different. The way people cast their ballots was different. It was just a crazy time back then, and we didn't have the technology, right? Just bottom line, we didn't have the technology we have today. And why does it take? I can upload a 1 gigabyte file. Let's just say I upload my podcast. It takes me 15 seconds. What other than the text data they're uploading when they upload these votes in some states? Why is it taking days to do an upload? Are they on like a dial-up modem? You know, like what is this 1978? Like what's going on? Why is it taking so long to upload this? Now, and then I see I'm sure everyone's been watching the news, and I see the ballot places, and I see them opening up these ballots, and one person has to open the seal. The next person has to make sure the ballot lays flat, and they flatten it out. And then, well, before that, there's actually one person, I believe, that counts them. And why are you counting them? I guess how many, I don't know, maybe a workflow thing. But why is it that this process is so, I mean, the post office has a conveyor belt when you get your mail now, and fairly, I mean, I say fairly new, but in the last 20, 30 years, but your mail gets scanned. Now you can get an email. If you weren't aware, check over the post office website, but you can get an email of all of the mail that is coming to your home for that day, and packages and tracking numbers for packages, and sometimes who they're coming from. So why are we doing this paper mail-in ballot process? They cannot find a way to do this securely? There's no way to find that out? Come on, folks. This is just, I think they leave it open for interpretations just like they do in the legal system. So they can have this open, you know, opportunity to either steal elections, they're saying, or you know, make, you know, the money, if the money's there, they can make things happen in a, I don't want to say an illegal way, but in a not proper way. And that's not good. That is not good either way. And the big thing is, if the state law, the state legislation in the different states sets the rules on these elections, who's enforcing the state law? Who's enforcing the state law? Who's to say you don't have a Democrat or a Republican governor, or I don't know, there's chiefs of elections. There's all these different titles that monitor them in different states. But who's to say that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing? That they don't have some sort of allegiance to a certain party or a certain politician in some way. And then you have, you know, you got all these different lobby groups. You got big pharma, you got big tech, big data, big whatever. And they're dumping all of this money into the system. And I gotta tell you, it really gets me worked up, AJ. And I hopefully, listeners, you understand where I'm coming from, and you just don't hear my ranting and raving. But this has got to change. They got to fix this. If we're going to survive as a country, and we're going to not break out into a civil war because of all of the discontent and the heartache because their candidate isn't winning, or the delay, just the people are very upset of just the delay of knowing, hey, the uncertainty. They need to know who's going to be the next president of their country. You know, whether your candidate wins or not. this can't happen. They got to fix this, and they need to fix it fast, and someone needs to step up and take care of this. I really feel it's one of those situations where if it's not taken care of soon, we will have there'll be big problems. There'll be big problems, and it just continues to cause divide in our country. I need to take a break, AJ. I need to take a break, get some fresh air, maybe get a sip of my coffee, and we're gonna take a break. Oh, no, I can't even talk anymore. We're gonna take a break, and we're gonna come back, and I'm gonna go over the Electoral College for anybody who would like to know. This is my view of it because I guess the Electoral College in some way is up for interpretation, but we're gonna take a break. Check us out on www.tooclevermafia.com. One thing I ask folks is definitely, wherever you're listening to us, like and subscribe. Whatever podcast service, just like and follow us. You'll get the latest information on our new episodes. I really do appreciate it. If you want to check us out on social media, we're at Tooclevermafia everywhere. So check us out, drop us a line. We love to hear you say hi. And if you got an opinion on this, either way, we love to hear it too, because maybe there's a view that we don't see, and we love to look at every angle, right? We want every angle here on the Too Clever Mafia podcast. Make sure we're covering all our bases. But we'll be right back after a short break. Stick around. We got a lot more to come. Welcome back again. Hello, AJ. Hello, Mafians. Hello, new listeners. This is your host, Too Clever Mafia. You're once again listening to the Too Clever Mafia podcast, and we are going to get right into something that a lot of people find confusing. They don't want to understand it, and if they do, maybe they don't understand it fully. But the Electoral College, right, folks? The Electoral College, something that is so. It just seems more complicated, I guess, maybe than it is in some ways. But okay, I'm gonna give you a breakdown. We're gonna get right into this, AJ, because this is important. Because some people look at it and then they say, "Well, the president can win by popular vote, or they can win by the Electoral College, and then the popular vote is not really going to make a difference." And why is that? And there's a lot of questions around it. But the president needs 270 Electoral College votes to win. And the election of the president of the United States is basically, I'm going to try to make this simple. Right, AJ? We're going to really make this as simple as I can. But basically, it's a two-step process. First, we cast our votes, right? We cast our ballots on election day. We go into the polling places if possible. We mail them in. Every state, that's what you do. You go and you cast your ballots, right? And then in nearly every state, the candidate who gets the most votes in that state ends up winning the electoral points, I guess we can call them. We'll call them points. Just to make this simple, we'll call them points, right? And each state has its own point system, but we're going to get into that in a moment. But the candidate who gets the most votes wins the electoral votes. Well, let's call them electoral votes for that state, and gets that number of voters or electors in the Electoral College. So simply put, your state votes for the president, whoever they pick. They get the Electoral College points or votes for that state, and then that's and then the president needs 270 to win. 270 to win. But in the Electoral College system, like each state gets a certain number of electors, which are votes or points, however you want to put it, based on the total number of representatives in Congress. That's how it's decided, right? And each elector casts one electoral vote following the general election. And there's a total of 538 electoral votes, right? And the candidate that gets more than half, which would be 270, right, wins the election. So that's that 270 number you've been watching on the news. So you got 538 possible electoral votes, and then 270 wins the election. Now, in the United States, what the Electoral College refers to, it refers to the group of presidential electors required by the United States Constitution to form every 4 years for the sole purpose of electing the president and the vice president of the United States. So that's the Electoral College in a nutshell. There are a couple of odd ones. I want to say I think it's Idaho, in Nebraska. I don't know, AJ. Maybe Nebraska. I don't know. And then there's one in the Northeast that kind of splits it up, has multiple districts. I ain't getting into that, but usually it's like 1 point here, 1 point there. It doesn't. I mean, it may make a difference in the end, but it's not necessarily something I'm going to get into tonight. But that's the Electoral College. That's how we do things. Now, my whole idea, and people say, oh, let's get rid of the Electoral College. Let's just do a popular vote. Well, that doesn't, I mean, it is a popular vote per state, but if you have a state like, let's say, California that has a huge population, or even a state like, I guess New Jersey, right? New Jersey's, I think, is the most densely populated state, but I don't know if it's the most populated. I don't think it is. But if you have a state like California, for example, they've got a lot of votes, and it's one state, and, states, go very seldom is a state go kind of in the middle, but usually they kind of lean one way or the other more. And in California, of late, it has been a Democratic state, so they could win the whole election. And then it's not necessarily a bad thing if you're a Democrat at this time, but the problem with that is you have, what about a state like, let's say, Montana, or a state like New Hampshire, or one of those that don't, so you wouldn't have a fair election. You wouldn't have the smaller states with less of a population, regardless of their size, wouldn't really have an impact on the voting system. So that's why they came up with the Electoral College. That's, in my belief, why they have the Electoral College, is so the smaller states with less population have a fighting chance and have a say in the election. So it kind of is voted on based on how many people, but it's also, you got to kind of cut that off, because it just wouldn't be fair if one state just could win the election every time. And then what would happen, clearly, if that was the way it was, the politicians would just hang out in that state, do good for that state, and all the other states would be forgotten about. So you don't want that. You don't want a situation. You want to try to keep it as balanced as possible, even though the population, we all know, it just isn't balanced. It's on the East Coast, the West Coast, you got Florida, and the majority of them, I mean, that's a good percentage of the population right there. And then the middle of the country, it's more spread out. But so that's the Tooclevermafia description, I'm going to say, of what we think the Electoral College is here at the Tooclevermafia podcast. And if I'm wrong, let me know. That's how I've read it to be. I've understood it for quite some time. And if you have an idea that you'd like to share with the show, please feel free to drop us a line on all the social medias, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You can email us at tooclevermafia@gmail.com. Why can't we get a clever@tooclevermafia.com email address, AJ, huh? We're working on it? Are we working on it, or are you just buying yourself a new reclining chair? Yeah, I saw that. I saw that chair come in. How come I didn't get a new chair? Using my company credit card. Well, anyway, we'll discuss that off the air. We'll parking lot that question for now. But anyway, yeah, parking lot. That's what I'm saying. But anyway, so we're gonna take a break. We're going to we're gonna talk a little bit when we come back about the different beliefs between the Republican parties and the Democratic parties in more modern day. And something's got to be done, folks. There's more similarities than there are differences between the different political parties, believe it or not. But it seems to be they fight with each other, and if there is a similarity there, lots of times, if you haven't noticed, they make it a difference. They add that conflict there, and then that is in part how the different political parties have changed so much over the years. I mean, the Republican Party of today is similar to the Democratic Party of yonder year, or whatever you want to say. But So, and the vice versa. So it's definitely something that has changed over time. And I think in part it's changed because they just want to fight with each other. They just need to keep the separation so they can get the votes. I mean, you have, when you look at our country now and you look at the separation of our country now, it's, you have your coast cities, right? You have your California, your New York, you got your Northeast, which is a lot of the Democratic, well, I guess the whole West Coast really now is Democratic. And then you have your core group, your heartland, if you want to call it, in the center of the country. And I guess you can count Florida, but they're kind of on the cusp, right? So that's all your Republican Party. And why is that? But we're going to get into that. We're going to break it down. We're going to give you our ideas on how to fix things. Not that it's going to make a difference, but if you are a politician and you've got the pull, right, AJ? If they got the pull to make some of these changes, or feel free to use their ideas. Feel free to take them, right? We're offering them up. Will we offer them up for free? AJ says no. We want royalty. Well, AJ's that's a good. Maybe you could pay off your chair with some of those royalties, AJ, right? But so we're going to take a short break, folks. And all I ask, once again, is whatever podcast host you're listening to us on, whether it's Apple Podcast or Google Podcast or Spotify, Anchor, Breaker, Radio Public, wherever you're listening to us, it's very important and it's very helpful for us just to like and subscribe and follow us. You'll be able to get updates on all of the new podcasts that we have. And we have a lot of contests coming up, right, AJ? Yeah, we got a big one coming up soon, probably next week. And the season's going to finish up. Is this true? I'm hearing the season might finish up at episode 30. We might cut the season, take some time off, take a little vacation break. Is this what I'm hearing? We're not 100% sure yet. No. AJ's got to meet with the writers and see what they say. But anyway, we will be right back after a short break. You want to check us out, www.tooclevermafia.com. And sit tight. We will be right back. Well, hello. Thank you again, AJ, for another lovely intro. And I am your host, Too Clever Mafia. You are listening to the Too Clever Mafia podcast. And welcome, Mafians. Welcome, new listeners. We are right in the thick of things today, but we're going to go over some of the Republican and Democratic beliefs in this episode. We're going to talk about a little bit of history, but not too much, not enough to bore anyone. And we are going to get right into it, right, AJ? As usual, here at the Too Clever Mafia podcast, we don't pull any punches. Even though we used to have a saying, we don't get political. But, I guess we're not getting political. We're kind of talking about politics, but not necessarily, when it comes to all of this, folks, to be honest, not a lot of it affects me on a day-to-day. Probably doesn't affect most of us on a day-to-day. And I think some of these politicians try to make it seem like it's going to have a huge impact on us. But a lot of these things that go on in the political world affect us over time. And you don't realize it until 15, 10 years later. And then, that political candidate is no longer even on the board. So, and that's my opinion. But, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But I've never had something where I voted for an individual and they changed my life tremendously the next day. So, if you can, I guess you're looking more towards the future, but some of us do live day to day, right, AJ? I think you live day to day. You never really look forward. I mean, I do. Got to make sure I got enough pills. Got to time them out so I can hit the pharmacy, get my refills before that ends. Right, AJ? Right? Yeah. Anyway. Enough back and forth here, but first we're going to dive into the two sides, right? We're going to dive into the Republican beliefs and then the Democratic beliefs, but we're going to start with the Republicans just because that's the order he put them in here. And in the 21st century, Republican Party, the ideology, we'll say, is American conservatism, right? And which incorporates both economic policy and social values. The GOP, as they call the Republican Party. So generally, and this is kind of a general overview. I mean, there are candidates obviously out there that don't believe or go the other way, and we kind of talked about it in the last segment where it just changes all the time, folks. What a Republican is and what a Democrat has changed so much over the course of history. Really, there's just side A and side B. To say this is a Republican belief as of today or Democratic belief as of today, it doesn't really apply if you look at it from you step back and you say, hey, does this really matter? But it doesn't. It really doesn't. I know, AJ. I know you pick a side because that's what you got to vote for, but it's just candidate 1, candidate 2, really, or candidate 3, and there's 4, 5, 6 is different. You have libertarian, you have independent, you have all those. They go down a list, but some of them do stick to their values, but not Republican Democrats have flip-flipped more times than I can count over the course of history. So, but generally the GOP supports lower taxes, right? Generally they support free market capitalism, right? They want free markets around the world, and they do generally put restrictions on immigration. Not one of those hot topic subjects of late. Increased. They usually have an increased military spending. They like to build up the armies to get them ready to go. Along with that, obviously, gun rights. They don't. They generally lean more toward the gun rights. Which it is what it is with that, and they do believe in restrictions on abortion. They enjoy deregulation. Taking those regulations off those big corporations, which I hate to add my opinion, but sometimes that isn't always a good thing. And they put those restrictions on labor unions, but over the course of time, they've changed. But in about, I think it was 1973, the Supreme Court decision. It was in 73. The decision came in Roe versus Wade, and the Republican Party opposed abortion in its party platform, and then that kind of grew the support among the evangelical group, the very religious folk, and now the GOP is now more supportive of free trade in the 20th century. But that's the basic overview of most Republican beliefs. So I mean, to sum it up, you got your lower taxes, your deregulation, the freedom of the guns or the gun rights, and the abortion issue. I mean, that's the hot topics of the Republican Party right now. So then you have on the Democratic side, the Democratic philosophy, the more modern philosophy of we'll say liberalism, blends the notion of civil liberty and social equality, which supports kind of a mixed, and they kind of support a mixed economy. In Congress, the party has influenced the more centrist, progressive. You've heard that term, and the conservative wings. But corporate governance reform, they don't like the big companies, which I don't see how that even. I mean, I guess they present that to the people, but they're all of these folks get money from these big corporations. Don't let them fool you, whatever side they're on. And but they're in for that reform. That's kind of their showcase. If they had a wall, AJ, of all of the different trophies, one of them would be corporate governance. Environmental protection would be in there as well. And they do support organized labor. Most of the unions they do support the Democrats, and the Democrats typically like to they expand social programs, which isn't a bad thing, but it's still money that's got to come from somewhere. And they typically like to expand on the social programs, and they love the idea of well, I guess if you look at the current time, you've heard the candidate Bernie Sanders. I think he ran on the Democratic ticket this election, but in 2016 he was an independent. But they say he's a democratic socialist, whatever that means. But he ran big on the free college. Well, Democrats typically do believe in affordable college tuition, which I'm not against that either. They tend to lean more towards a universal health care system. And that's something that I think most people would support, a universal health care system, if there was a way to pay for it that didn't come out of their pocket. I don't think you can have both. I do believe in the idea of free healthcare for everyone, but how do you pay? You just, I mean, there's a lot of things folks believe in and would love to have that just financially doesn't make sense. I'd love to go out and buy a Ferrari and pay cash, but you can't. I can't do it. You just can't do it. So I think they have to figure that out. And we have our police in the United States, our firemen, our EMS. Lots of those folks are government funded, and healthcare probably should be on that list. But we got a long way to go before we figure out how to pay for that stuff. Democrats are big on equal opportunity for everyone, and I do like that. And they are out more for consumer protections, which goes back to the corporate governance part of it. And from the core, that's their core party. That's the economic agenda, so to speak. And then on social issues, it generally advocates campaign finance reform, which we're going to talk about in the next segment. That's a big one. They support LGBT rights. They support the criminal justice and immigration reforms. They want that. They do look for stricter gun laws typically, which I'm not against. I'm not. I know. Surprise, right? I'm not against stricter gun laws because we record the show and we live here in New Jersey, and our gun laws are really, really strict. But I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to walk around with a pistol on your hip, walking around downtown, going to the 7-Eleven, to get your coffee, or what do you? I can understand maybe more of a freedom if you wanted to carry a weapon of some sort on your person, but I got to tell you, as an advocate for guns in general, there's a lot of safety that needs to be, you need to get training. You need to understand what you're doing. You need to be extremely careful. I mean, it is a tool, but you can't just, and I hate to say it, but not everyone would take the same precautions, so that some especially a heavily populated area, and not everybody's going to agree with me on this, but there has to be some fair restrictions. Now, there's some restrictions in our state, in New Jersey, when it comes to gun laws. They minimize the amount of ammunition you can have in the weapon. I think it's 10 and 10. Yeah, it's 10 in a magazine, and they for pistol, and I don't know if that makes a difference whether you have 10 or 15, or what it used to be I think 15 or 17, what they hold. I don't know if that kind of stuff makes a difference. I do believe that background checks should be done. There's no reason for that not to be. I don't want some lunatic running around with a gun that just got out of prison for shooting someone. You don't want that stuff. So that I'm okay with. But I think if you're a responsible gun owner, that you should be allowed to do what you want to do as a responsible gun owner. So we're not going to get in. We'll make that a whole nother episode, AJ. But I'm not going to get too much into that. But what's that? Oh yeah, yeah. AJ's just telling me that I really went down the road of gun rights. But no, I feel strongly about it, and I don't necessarily believe there shouldn't be any. I don't necessarily believe, either way. But that was just one of the things that a Democrat, the party, believes in. They believe in that. They also believe in abortion rights. I believe they call that the abortion rights are a woman's right to choose. And I don't necessarily disagree with that either. Yeah. I don't necessarily disagree with it. But that, and then they also disagree. They also are for the legalization of marijuana. Now that's something I feel really depends on your view of smoking. I mean, of anything. I mean, I personally don't smoke, and really have no desire to. inhale smoke into my lungs. But there are people that enjoy it. They want to do it. But again, if it doesn't affect me, in my view, I do what you want to do. Do whatever makes you happy. That's if it makes sense to you and it's not hurting anyone else, go for it. That's what I say. So yeah, I just exactly right. AJ is telling me that makes perfect sense. Just don't don't get involved and don't make me want to believe what you believe. Just do what you want to do. If it's legal, it makes you happy. You're not offending me. Do what you want to do, right? So that's kind of the summary of the Democrats and the Republicans party in between. But we're gonna take a short break now because we're trying to keep these short. I don't want to ramble on for an hour and a half on these and you fall asleep. But we're gonna dive after we take a break. We're gonna dive right into. I wanted to talk about campaign finance reform, and there's just too much money in politics, AJ. But check us out over on the Too Clever Mafia website, www.tooclevermafia.com. Sign up for all our social media so you can be eligible for contests and prizes on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And don't forget to like and subscribe on whatever podcast you're listening to, whether it's Spotify, Apple, Google, Breaker, Radio Public, any of those. Just like and subscribe. That helps us the most. And we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back after this. Hello, everyone. Welcome back, Mafians. Welcome, new listeners. Welcome, everyone. Hello, AJ. Thank you for another lovely sound melody mix, whatever you want to call it, AJ, over in the sound booth. Thank you again. And we are back. We are back again. I am your host, Too Clever Mafia. You are still listening to the Too Clever Mafia podcast, and we are going to talk about campaign finance reform. There's just too much money in politics, AJ, and I think that causes a lot of the issues that we're seeing today. And I don't know if it'll ever change. Money is kind of the ruler of everything. But a couple of things I want to get out there. Okay, and this goes all the way. You take yourself back in history to the Gettysburg Address. Okay, and Lincoln's immortal speech, defining democracy as government of the people, by the people, for the people. Okay, and he also had the famous in that Gettysburg Address. He also has the famous line, if you want to call it, but starts off 70 years ago. Our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now, while the U.S. is often categorized as a democracy, the United States is more accurately defined as a constitutional federal republic, or just a republic you've heard probably. But and in the context of U.S. constitutional law, the definition of a republic refers specifically to a form of government in which elected officials or individuals represent the citizen body and better and exercise power accordingly to the rule of law under the Constitution, including separation of powers, which is very important that we're seeing today. Some of the powers seem to be, with an executive, I say executive decision. That was a movie with Steven Seagal and John Leguizamo, I think, or something. I think Kurt Russell, I think, might have been in that too. But an executive order is the word I was looking for, AJ. Thank you. But that separation of power with an elected head of state, referred to as a constitutional republic or a representative democracy, and it gets confusing. But to represent the people need, and follow me here because we do get back to the corporate finance reform as you will. But to represent the people need to be represented. I know a millionaire and a billionaire. It does not necessarily represent me or any of the people I know, to be quite frank. They could not possibly know how to live paycheck to paycheck. And I'm not talking about somebody that wins the lottery, wins the Powerball for 300 million and walks away with 150 million in taxes and then, blows it and in a year they're bankrupt. But, for the majority of Americans and, to be able to understand their daily struggles, I don't think a millionaire or a billionaire that was born into riches, or, have amassed it over a time really, it's if you ever learn something, it's very difficult to do. And this is not necessarily the billionaire or the millionaire's fault. But if you think about something that you learned, something complex that you learned a long time ago, that you learned it over time and you improved better, and someone that came into it, whatever it was, wouldn't be able to understand it without being fully trained or understand whether it was at work or whatnot, a computer program. And to be able to get back down to that basic level, the fundamentals, well, not even the fundamentals, but to understand, a lot of it is, picture a stairway. When you learn something, you start at the bottom of the stairs, and then you just take a step, and then you go to the top of the stairs. Now, at a certain point, it's very hard to see that first step, and as time goes on. So, if you follow me, from being a millionaire or a billionaire that has multiple houses, mansions, they're served dinner, they're served lunch, they have drivers, eventually you forget that first step. So to be able to understand what it took to make that first step is very, very challenging. And it's difficult, but those folks do not understand. And we could talk until we're blue in the face, but I don't believe that they would fully understand where we would come from. So, I mean, sure, they'll tell the people what they want to hear. They can, to get their vote, and they'll give us empty promises because most of the time that's what it is, unless it supports their own personal agenda. But all of this will never work for America because eventually, and it does take time, it may take 10, 15, 20 years, but it will take time. And all of a sudden, certain classes of people will realize, hey, that party does not represent me at all. They've done nothing. They said they're going to do all this stuff. And, people will wake up. Eventually they'll realize, hey, listen, it's been 2 terms or 8 years or, Senate people are in there for 6 years. So let's say 12 years. What have you done? And eventually people will be asking questions. So don't be fooled. They're not representing the individuals that are in political offices now are not necessarily representative of the people. There are some young ones that just started, that are new, that may have maybe more in touch, but the establishment is going to push those folks out. If you watch what happens, you just watch. And, unless, and there's always going to be that divide in the country. It's very difficult because unless rights are taken away from us, there will always be a divide. And obviously we don't want our rights taken away from us. But if you follow what I'm going to say here, the only surefire way to get rid of the divide is to remove our choices and our options and our rights. And we don't want that. As a people in America, we don't want our rights taken away. And, in some instances, to have more security, we're willing to give up more rights. And it's a slippery slope, folks. You give every right, you're never getting that back. And I've talked about this before. And, some people are okay with it. Is it bad? Is it good? Well, it depends on where you stand, I guess. But it really, it depends on what your needs are and what matters to you most and what you're willing to give up to gain what little sense of security or whatever it is. And you're giving up so much more when you give up your rights because you'll never get them back. And eventually, there are plenty of examples, but things that were given to give up rights, you lose those too. You may lose those too. And, I don't want to get too crazy here, but corporate governance, affordable college tuition, universal health care, campaign finance reform, criminal justice, and immigration reform. I can go on and on and on. All these things that we want, you're going to give up something. You're going to give up. You're going to pay more taxes. You're going to be giving up your money. You're going to, it's a slippery slope. And I can go to each item, but I think everyone understands where I'm coming from. And I can definitely go on and on for days on this, but I want to keep it focused on how, in my opinion, we can fix some of these things. But some of them may matter to you. But with more law, naturally comes less freedom. And if you're involved in science and you understand Newton's third law, which you probably have heard, if you don't have to be a scientist to know, but for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction, and that's what's happening here. In order to get more security, you have to be okay to be scanned in an airport, or and are you really? And is it worth it? Are you really more safe? Is the security theater in an airport making you more safe? We don't know. We don't know. Maybe you do know, but I don't feel like the things that we give up, we're actually valued in a way that I am willing to give up. I kind of, maybe I'm okay dealing with it, but so in short, this is why most anything will never be more than, we'll say 51% in your favor, because that's the best we can hope for. That's the best we can hope for, because you're always going to have those two sides. You're always going to have someone that's willing, that really wants it and is willing to give up their rights. And you have other folks that it's not that close to them and they're not willing to give up their rights until they flip sides, and eventually it ends up on your side. So we really need to figure out a way to get some of this money out of the government. We really there's too much money going. Out of the government, but there's too much money going into these campaign financing. It's just too much. There's just too much. And I say, we should make it illegal. Like my grandson, who's in high school, came up with a brilliant idea, and he said, we were talking about. If something came out with the election, and they were asking if a commercial came on, and they were talking about donations, and he said, let's pay politicians whatever the median income is in an area they represent. That's what their pay should be. And how can a politician that's making a government salary have a mansion, especially if their whole life they're in politics? Like, where are they getting that money? I understand they're meeting people that, those of us who work for a company or have worked for a company, a major corporation, there's rules on what you can get as far as, the this for that, the quid pro quo, as they call it. You cannot, you should not be able, a government official should not be able to make ties and allow people to, what they called back in my day, the grease the palms, and you go into politics with nothing. You should be able to come out as a humble a civil servant, and you work, you get your pension, and you retire. Like, where they're making this money, folks, because they're doing things on the side, meeting people because of their influence. And don't tell me that someone that makes all that money is not using their influence and their power. They're without that, they wouldn't have been able to make any of that money. They wouldn't be hired as a consultant. They wouldn't, when they really have nothing, think about it. All it takes to become a congressman or a senator is you have to be elected. That's it. You don't have to have any special background, or, you do need to have the money because you got to be able to advertise and beat your opponent. But there's been plenty of instances where someone just jumped in and ended up being elected and wasn't really a qualified politician. And a lot of times that they, that's what they run on. They run on the fact that they're not a qualified politician. So real quick, AJ wants me to take a break here, but real quick, we'll let's say we made it illegal for any person to be donating more than $100, and we get rid of all type of business donations. You're not allowed to accept business donations at all as a politician. I think that seems fair, right? You figure about roughly 70 million people voted for each candidate this past election. That's if you multiply that, that's a potential $7 billion per candidate if they get their money. Why they need that money to run for president, I don't know. $7 billion per candidate is crazy. And per NPR, if you pull up, I'll leave the link in the description. But I was just curious about how much money each campaign made. And Joe Biden and Donald Trump both raised roughly $1.5 billion with a B, folks. B as in boy, $1 billion each per the FEC filings. Now, that's a lot of money. That's more than most of us will ever see in multiple lifetimes. Yet they're raising that much money. And a lot of it is coming from corporations and businesses. And they don't need that much money. What do? They just go and they put online, they go and they take an ad out against their opponent, and they're paying all these the big corporations that do the advertising. They're paying them this money to advertise these spots and all over the country. But you're going to tell me that $1.5 billion, I can't even imagine, is not enough? If they need that much money, then why do they need it? Like they should be able to get out there and convince the voters that they'll be able to help them do what they want to do without all the attack ads and all of that and redirection. I mean, and then you got donations by people like Mike Bloomberg, who spent over $1 billion on his own campaign for president. We all saw him up on the stage if you watch the Democratic debates, and $1 billion. Just imagine that much. Imagine I had that much money, AJ, just to flush down the toilet. Unbelievable. But then he went and spent more than $100 million in states that it looked like Joe Biden was on track to lose in. $100 million. Again, more than most people will see in their entire life. This is crazy. This is a crazy, crazy system. No more business donations. They have to stop. There's a need. There has to be a limit on these ads and the airtime. And back in the day, you used to have equal airtime, and they used to force the balance of time on television. And it's not like that anymore. And not only do you get an election, you end up with an election that has, if you get rid of this stuff, has less bias, and you'll have one that's maybe more based on facts. And not based on which TV channel you watch or which news channel you watch, but it'll force the candidates to actually work for the people. And they will be forced to answer those tough questions instead of just redirecting them. And they'll win votes, earn votes, and not just attack their opponents' records. Force elected officials to represent the people and be of the people, not just the king's men or women. Like medieval times, soldiers walking out with chainmail and armor. I gotta tell you, folks, that's just we're gonna leave that as my final words, because this just gets me all heated up. And I want everybody to have a great weekend. Hopefully, this whole presidential election gets sorted out. One thing I ask is everybody just sign up on the, like and subscribe and follow the podcast. We really, really do appreciate that. If you want to follow us on social media, it's at Tooclevermafia. Check out our website. Want some more info, the kind of the things we do, www.tooclevermafia.com. And that is all I have to say about that, my friends. Until next time, bye-bye for now.